Good morning. It's day 6 with Homeroom with Mrs. Hooker. Today's date is the 24th. The month is March. And remember, March is the name, so it gets a capital M on March. It's the name of the month. And then the day is Tuesday, and we get a capital T on Tuesday. And for the date that I said, it was the 24th, we have to look at the tens and ones. So we have 2 tens and 4 ones. If we were to turn that into money, it would be 1 dime, which is 10 cents, 2 nickels, and 4 pennies, and that would be 24 cents. And the year is 2020. And I did have some kiddos who caught my mistake. So if you look on the card, we only had 1 thousandths cube, and we should have had 2 thousandths cube. So it's 2 thousandths, 0 hundredths, 2 tens, and 0 ones. So if we would have done it correctly, we should have had 2 thousandths cube. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. Okay, so the month is March, the day is Tuesday, the year is 2020, and the date is the 24th. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about measurement for math, and we're going to be talking about plants for science. And then the story we're reading today is called The Bernstein Bears Forget Their Manners. If you have your journal that you've been doing, your writing journal, today's prompt is this picture, and it says, "I never expected to see one of those on a farm," said Noah. "Wow," said Kaylee. "Is it a real live?" And then ... So you are going to go ahead and use this story prompt and write a story in your notebook or your journal to just practice our writing. So remember, a sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with a punctuation mark, and then a story needs to have an introduction, a middle, and an end. So when you're using these story prompts, be working on those things in your writing just to make sure that you're getting it in and practicing it. So when you do go back to school, you have a good start on your writing. So again, the prompt is, "I never expected to see one of these on a farm," said Noah. "Wow," said Kaylee. "Is it a real live?" And then you get to fill in the rest. All right. So the time is, and you might be watching this at a different time, but the time is, and we're going to do 11 o'clock. So our hour hand, since I said 11 first, our hour hand is going to point to the 11, and then our minute hand, which is the longer hand, points to the 12. When we're at the 12, it says o'clock. So remember that the hour hand is the shorter hand, and one way you can remember that is the word hour is shorter than the word minute. So go ahead and look at your clocks at home and see what time your clock says. All right, and now we're going to look at where we are on the map. So we've talked about this every day that we've done this lesson, that Mrs. Hooker is from Iowa. The last lesson that we used the map, we talked about the stars on the map, and they stand for the capitals of the states. So the capital of Iowa is Des Moines. I want you to get on the map or ask your parents, what is the capital of the state that you live in? If you live in Iowa, then it's Des Moines. If you don't, go ahead and look on your map and see if you can figure out what the capital is of your state. Okay. So today with our map, what we're going to talk about is the compass rose. So on most maps, it has a compass rose, which is this little thing right here. It has an N, an E, you can't see it because it's cut off, but an S and a W. So a compass rose tells us the directions of things on a map. So Mrs. Hooker printed a bigger one, and it's right here. So we have north, east, south, and west. So I have taught my kids in my class how to remember this is never eat sour worms. And that's how you remember the directions. So really quick, if we looked at our map, we can use this compass rose to give directions or follow directions. So if Mrs. Hooker said, what is the state that is directly east of Iowa? So you would use your compass rose and you would go, east, north, east, okay, east. So here's Iowa. What is the state that is east of Iowa? Well, that would be Illinois, right there. Also, Wisconsin is east of Iowa as well. Kind of if you lived in the top part of Iowa, it's towards the east. So that is what this is on a map. It is called your compass rose, and it helps you to be able to give directions or follow directions that someone gives you. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and go feed Walter, but before we do, Mrs. Hooker wanted to read you just a couple of facts about fish from our fish book that we read last time. So this page is going to talk to us a little bit about the fish's skin, or as we find out, they're called scales. Most fish have a skin that is covered with scales. Scales help fish to swim too. The scales are hard and clear. They overlap like shingles on a roof. So if you look at the roof of your house, it has like those little squares on top, and those are called shingles. And those protect your roof from the rain and the snow from getting inside and into the wood of your house. So when it says they overlap means like this. So Mrs. Hooker's hands, this would be separate, this would be overlapping. So their scales, the fish's scales, like the shingles on your roof, overlap. These slick scales let the fish slide easily through the water. A clear slime covers the scales, and it helps the fish glide through the water too. Scales and slime also help to keep a fish healthy. The stiff scales protect a fish's delicate skin from cuts and scrapes. So underneath the scales is the fish's skin, and so the scales are a protection against getting cut and scraped. Kind of like how you wear shin guards if you play soccer, and that's a protection against your legs if you were to get kicked or something like that when you're playing soccer or get hit by the ball. Those shin guards protect your legs, protect your skin from getting hurt. That's what these scales do for a fish. They protect their skin from scratches. Many germs in the water get stuck in the fish's slime coating and are washed away before they can make the fish sick. Both scales and slime keep the water from seeping into the fish's skin. So they protect the fish from getting water inside of them, which is kind of cool. Also something to know, if you have a fish or you're planning to get one, if you touch a fish's scales, it can actually hurt their scales as well. That's why we're not supposed to touch fish in the tank with our hands. Our hands have an oil on them that can hurt animals differently than, it obviously doesn't hurt us. So Walter, he actually jumped out of his tank one time, a long time ago. I had left for vacation, and there was a storm and the electricity had gone out. And so his filters, that's what keeps his tank clean, stopped working. And so because they stopped working, it started getting really icky in there. So he jumped out of the tank, and I found him. We had gotten back and noticed the tank was dirty. I should start there. And then we found him the next day on the floor in the kitchen. So he had jumped clear out of the tank into the kitchen. So it was like probably, I would say, like 6 feet away. And he was still alive, because as long as a fish has its gills, that's the part right here where it breathes wet, it can live. And so we picked him up with our hands because we just wanted to get him in the water really quick. And so picked him up, put him in the water, and he was in shock because he'd been out, and so I had to help him swim and all this stuff. And the next day, like after he'd gotten out of shock and he was swimming on his own, you could see his scales had turned kind of red and flaky, and some of them had fallen off, and his tail fins were red. which wasn't normal for him. So that's what happened because my skin touched him. It hurt his scales and his tail fins, and so they have special medicine that if you do have to touch your fish to help them, you can put in there, and it'll kind of like putting lotion on your skin to help your skin when it's dry and hurt. This special medicine that you put in the tank can help their scales too. So if you are planning on getting fish, that is something to know, not to touch their scales because it can hurt them. They're very delicate. That means breakable. All right, let's go feed Walter. Can you say hi, Walter? All right, his automatic feeder is out of food, so we're just gonna get him food out of his fish flakes. These are the fish flakes that we buy for Walter. If you want a goldfish, these are good flakes, and they just sell them at Walmart. I don't think he's very hungry right now. You come eat, buddy? Look, look. Sometimes when he's just sitting in the water like that, he's actually sleeping. Another interesting fact about fish is they don't have eyelids, so you can't actually see when they're sleeping or not. So he was just sitting there, and usually when he's just sitting there floating, he's sleeping. All right. Okay, so moving on, today we are going to read the story, The Bernstein Bears Forget Their Manners. And this story was written by John and Stan Bernstein. So that's kind of cool. When you're an author, you can make the characters represent you and your family, like John and Stan did. Sorry, Jan and Stan. Their last name is Bernstein, and so they decided that the family in the book was going to have the same last name as them. So that's kind of neat. So when you're the author, you get to make decisions like that. Remember, the author is the person who writes the book, so writes the words, and then the illustrator is the person who does the pictures. So before we get reading The Bernstein Bears Forget Their Manners, this week we're going to be talking and reading about who, what, when, where, and how. So when we're reading through the Bernstein Bear book today, we're going to be looking to see who the story is about, what happened in the story, when did the story take place, where did the story take place, and how did the story end. So who was in the story? That would be the characters, the main characters, so who the story was all about. What happened in the story would be like the problem. So what they were trying to solve, what was the main thing going on. So that would be the what. When did the story take place? Sometimes they don't tell you when the story took place. Sometimes you have to look at the pictures, especially in our picture books. A lot of times they don't mention a date or a time or something like that. So you have to look at the pictures to kind of figure out when the story took place. So if the sun is shining in the pictures, it probably took place during the day. If the sun is gone and the moon is out and in the picture it has a black sky, then it probably took place at nighttime. You can also tell when in the year it took place by if there's flowers out or if there's snow on the ground. You can tell if it was in summer or in winter. So that's one way we can figure out when a story took place. And where did the story take place? Again, sometimes our stories will tell us, but a lot of times you have to look at the pictures for clues. So where did the story take place? You can look at the picture and be able to tell, oh, it took place in the house, or it took place on the playground, or it took place in school. And sometimes stories take place in more than one place. So you might have more than one answer for this question. And then the last one is, how did the story end? And that kind of actually comes back up to the what happened in the story, because usually the problem by the end of the story is getting solved. So you have the what, and then the problem is getting solved. So that's one way that you can tell what happened in the story and how did the problem get solved. That's what I usually ask my students. So what's the problem? And then the how is how did they solve it? All right, so we're just gonna stick that back up here. So while we're reading the book today, Mrs. Hooker is gonna stop when we get to the answers of some of these questions, so we can start figuring out when we read a book how to answer the who, what, when, where, and how. All right, the Bernstein Bears forget their manners. There was trouble in the big tree house down on the sunny dirt road, deep in bear country. Trouble with manners. The bear family's trouble with manners was what they forgot. Okay, so I had my little raccoons over here. I don't know if you could see them. And they say where and when. Because on this first page, we answered both of those questions. So it says there was trouble in the big tree house on sunny dirt road, deep in bear country. So the where was the big tree house. So we're gonna write this down. In bear country. So they did tell us exactly where the story is taking place. The big tree house, and it's in bear country. That's the other cool thing about being an author, is you can make up new places in a story. So like these authors made up bear country. All right, so we're gonna stick the sticky note right here for the where. So where the story took place was the big tree house in bear country. And then the other sticky note was when. So when did the story take place? And it said it took place on a sunny day in bear country. And you can tell in the picture too that it's taking place on a sunny day. So maybe the summer or the spring. I would say probably the summer, because you can see the flowers are out, the tree is in full bloom, and usually at springtime there's still some leaves missing, things are just starting to come out. So I would say this story probably took place in the summer, and it looks like it happened during the day. So for when, we're going to put summer. And daytime. It's hard to tell if it was the morning or the afternoon or when for sure, so we're just gonna put daytime. So for when the story took place, we're gonna put that right here. Summer and daytime. All right, let's keep going. Can you guys see that? Okay. At first, it was just an occasional please or thank you that was forgotten. Then there was a rude push without an excuse me. When I reached across the table instead of a please pass the broccoli. So you can see brother and sister bear, they're having problems with saying please and thank you, saying excuse me when someone's pushing somebody else, even if it was an accident. And then brother bear, he's reaching across the table instead of saying could you please pass, he's reaching across. Mama bear wasn't quite sure how or why it happened, but she was sure of one thing. Whatever the reason, the bear family had become a pushing, shoving, name-calling, ill-mannered mess. Silly head, fuzzy brain. All right, so you can see in this picture we have sister pushing brother bear, name-calling, they're making faces at each other, just a whole mess. So, who is this story about? Who are the characters that we've seen so far? So we've seen brother and sister bear, we've seen Papa Bear, and then we just saw on the last page, Mama Bear. So for our who, we're just gonna write the Bernstein Bears. Our what? Who are the characters in this story? The Bernstein Bears. So So that's going to go right up here on our who. At the table, it was even worse. They were a grabbing, mouth-stuffing, food-fighting, kicking under the table, super mess. Of course, Mama Bear tried to correct brother and sister's behavior. She tried coaxing. She tried complaining. She tried shouting. She tried going to Papa for help, though it sometimes seemed to Mama that he was part of the problem. Papa banged on the table and shouted as only he could shout, but nothing really seemed to do any good. I want to go back to this word up here, coaxing. So you can see that Mama Bear is smiling in this picture when it says she's coaxing. So coaxing would be like, oh, would you please not do that? I really like it when you sit nicely and you do good things. So that's what coaxing is. All right, so after reading these last few pages, I think we can solve the what. So what was the problem, or what is the problem in the story so far? So the problem is that the bears have bad manners. So manners is when you say please and thank you, and you open the door for people, and you ask someone to pass you something when you're sitting at the table eating. So those would be good manners. Bad manners are when you don't do those things, which we've been reading about with these bears. So what is the problem? It's bad manners. Mama didn't like what was happening to her family, not one bit. Something had to be done. But what? The best way to fight bad habits, she thought, was with good habits. Then she thought of a plan. She got a big piece of cardboard and a marker, and at the top she wrote, "The Bear Family Politeness Plan." When the plan was finished, she called a family meeting and showed it to Papa and the cubs. Sorry guys, I've done a bad job of showing you the pictures. And we kind of have, I'm gonna turn our light down a little bit. It's a little bright. Is that better? It certainly got the Bear family attention. The Bear Family Politeness Plan. Rudeness. Forgetting to say please or thank you. Pushing or shoving, interrupting, name-calling, reaching at the table, playing with food, rude noises, banging the door, forgetting excuse me, and hogging the bathroom. The penalty, so that's what happens if you do these things. You have to sweep the front steps, beat 2 rugs, dust downstairs, clean the basement, clean the yard, wash the dishes, weed the garden, clean the attic, empty the garage, and put out the trash. So if Mama Bear catches you doing any of these rude things, she is going to make them do these penalties. Mama's plan had a list of all the rude things she wanted to stop. Beside each one was a penalty, a job or a chore that went with it. If you forget to say please or thank you, you had to sweep the front steps. And if you pushed or shoved, you had to beat 2 rugs. And if you got caught name calling, you had to clean the whole basement. But Mama, spurted the cubs, you're not being fair. It seems to me she said that you're the ones who aren't being fair to yourselves or anyone else. That's what manners are all about, being fair and considerate. Manners are very important, and they help us get along with each other. Why, without manners, you're absolutely right. Interrupted Papa. Thank you, Papa, for your comment, but interrupting is number 3 on the rude list, and the penalty is dusting downstairs, Mama said, and handed him a feather duster. Ooh, so it's not just the cubs that have to do this. Said Brother. This looks serious. I think we better come up with a plan of our own, or we're going to be doing a lot of extra chores. What sort of plan? Asked Sister. Well, he said, instead of just being polite, will be super polite. We'll please and thank you so much that Mama will get fed up with it and call the whole thing off. Yeah, Sister said. We'll be so polite, she won't be able to stand it. They put their plan into action. They were super polite. On the stairs, after you, sister dear. Why, thank you, dear brother. In the hall, excuse me, brother dear. Why, certainly, dear sister. Waiting for the bathroom. Terribly sorry to have kept you waiting. Think nothing of it, my dear. So they're being super polite. But it didn't work that way. But it didn't work the way they expected. Mama didn't get fed up at all. And after a while, brother and sister forgot about being super polite and were just polite. At the table, pass the honey, please. Certainly. In their room, would you like me to help you pick up your toys? Oh, well, thank you very much. In the yard, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump you. That's all right, no harm done. And it turned out that Mama had been right. Things did go more smoothly. Once they got into good manner habits, they didn't even have to think about it. But it wasn't so easy for Papa. He was the one who got fed up. It's a little harder to change habits when you're older, and he had to do quite a few extra chores for forgetting his manners. I'm glad to get out of the house anyway, with that pointless plan, he said as he drove the family along the highway on a trip to the supermarket. Manners and courtesy are just important away from home, especially on the road, said Mama, as they stopped at a stop sign to let pedestrians, that's people, cross. They help us drive safely. Well, grumbled Papa, as they all went into the supermarket, I think you can have too much of a good thing. You've got to have some common sense along with manners. Why, if you let everyone go ahead of you in the checkout, you'd be there forever. And sometimes you have to interrupt. Excuse me, ma'am, he interrupted a shopper, but I believe you have a leaking bottle in your cart. The shopper thanked him for his help. You see, he said, driving home, there's more to life than remembering your manners. Besides, manners are all right for cubs and mama bears. Uh-oh, what's happening? Bonk. But when Papa Bears have other things to think about, and at that moment the car in front stopped suddenly and Papa bumped into it. He was furious. Why, that pin-headed fiddle brain, he sneered. Name-calling, reminded Sister. The penalty for name-calling was cleaning the whole basement, so Papa gritted his teeth and remembered his manners. And a good thing, too, because climbing out of the other car was the biggest, angriest bear he had ever seen. But then the angry bear saw how polite Papa was, and he remembered his manners, too. And he explained that he had stopped short because the mama duck and her ducklings had crossed in front of him. Then he and Papa Bear looked at their bumpers and saw that no harm was done. As I was saying, said Papa, as they continued on their way, it's very important for us to remember our manners at all times, and I want to thank you, Sister, for reminding me to remember mine. Well, you are very welcome, I'm sure, said Sister Bear politely. All right, so our last sticky note is how. So remember, we have to go back to the what was the problem, and the problem was bad manners. So how did they solve these bad manners? And they solved their bad manners by following Mama Bear's plan, right? Mama Bear had the manner plan. So how did they solve the problem? By being polite and following the plan. Okay. So I want you guys to think about this book today while you're in your houses and you're having to stay inside and you can't go to school and you can't really go out. Sometimes we can get aggravated with the people in our home, with the people around us because we're having to stay in one place. and we just kind of are getting bored. And so I want to remind you of your manners. Because yes, you can get aggravated and it might feel good in the moment to holler at somebody or to slam your hand on the table or to shove somebody without saying excuse me or things like that. But afterwards, you're going to start feeling pretty bad. And it's going to make the other people around you feel bad. And it's going to cause them to have bad manners and bad attitudes. And so if you choose to have a good attitude and good manners, it's going to help a lot with everybody in the house and is going to make everybody feel better in the long run. So just like the Bernstein Bears found out, it's better to have good manners than bad manners. All right, so Miss Hooker has a little project that I want you guys to do at home, and this is actually a project that I did in college. So Miss Hooker is giving you college homework today. So this is a big deal. So this is something that I made in college. And you open it up, and it looks like a police box or like a telephone box. And this is from the show Doctor Who. You open it up, and inside is a picture of me and all of this stuff about me. So I'm going to talk about this really quick, what this is for and why we're doing this. So we just talked about who, what, where, when, and how. So I want you to make one of these for yourself. I want you to make a who, what, where, when, why, and how on yourself. So I want you to be the story, and I want you to explain who you are, what you're all about, where you live, how old you are, all of those things with using pictures from magazines or pictures that you have. And I want you to glue them into a folder, or you can just do them on a piece of paper. Miss Hooker used a folder. And I made my story of who I was, who I am, with pictures. And so let me explain mine really quick to you. So for the who, I put a picture of myself. That's my who. For what Mrs. Hooker wants to do with my life, for my story, I want to change the world. And then there's a quote here by Audrey Hepburn. She said, "You have two hands, one for helping yourself and the other for helping others." So that was my quote that I liked, and you guys don't have to put a quote. A quote is just something that you really enjoy hearing. I put pictures of yarn because I like to knit, and I put my name. I like to travel, so I put some Chinese money from when I went to China, and flowers and different things like that. All the things that I like, that I enjoy. I kind of have some pictures of a farm because that's where I grew up. I grew up on a farm in the country. So this is my who, what, where, when, and why, all about me. I also have my little glittery thing because I like glitter and sparkles. So Mrs. Hooker wants you to use magazines or newspapers or pictures that you have at home, and make sure you ask Mom and Dad before you start cutting up pictures from your photo album. You need to make sure that they're okay with that. I don't want you to get in trouble. So, and magazines too, ask permission before you start cutting up Mom and Dad's magazines. But you can go ahead and find pictures in those magazines that you really like, and this is called a collage. So it's when you mesh a bunch of things together into one big picture or one big story. So I want you to go ahead and make one of these for yourself. And then I would love to see pictures of them too, of what you did for your collage about your story. So remember, you're explaining your who, what, where, when, why, and how of yourself with these pictures. Okay. Alrighty. So moving on, today we are going to be doing we're doing math. And in math, we're doing measurement. So last week we were working on money, and this week we're working on measurement. So today is just a simple lesson. We're just going to be going over the vocabulary. I'm going to be introducing to you some of the words that you're going to be hearing throughout the week when we're learning about measurement. And then tomorrow we'll actually start looking at some of the tools we can use to measure, and we'll start talking more in depth about how to use measurement and what we can measure. So today the vocabulary that we're going to be discussing is different types of measurement. So there are actually two measurement systems that we use in the United States. One is called customary and one is called metric. And so if you do traveling when you grow up and you go to other countries, they are going to be using the metric system. And in America, we use the customary system. So the customary system was put in place when America was founded. This is what we were using. And then a lot of the world switched to using the metric system because it was easier to use for science and for other things. They just felt the metric system was better. And so they switched to that. And we switched to it as well, kind of. So in America, we use the metric system a lot for, in your science classes, you're going to use the metric system. You're going to see the metric system on a lot of things, but a lot of times you're going to see the customary system. So it's good to know both and understand terms from both systems because you will see them in different things in different places. So a lot of why we didn't switch completely over to the customary system was because there was machinery, there were things that were already being used that were in this customary system. And so the United States kind of kept it around. So it's not super important that you know the history of that or anything. You just need to know that there are two systems, customary and metric, and that we use both. Okay? All right, so the first measurement, so the measurement is the length of something from point A to point B. So the first measurement we're talking about is inches. Inches are about the length of a paper clip. So if you have a little paper clip, that is about 1 inch long. So that's the customary measurement. And then the metric measurement is centimeters. And centimeters is about the width of the tip of your pinky. So the width means how far across. So that would be this direction. So a centimeter is about the width of the tip of your pinky. All right, next is feet. Feet, or a foot, is the length of a ruler. So a ruler that you use in art class or to measure things with at home, it is a foot long. In the metric system, they use meters. Meters is about the height of your kitchen sink. So if you looked at your kitchen sink and you saw how tall it was, that would be a meter. Okay, and then we also have yards, which yards are they're similar to a meter. And a yard is about the width of a door. So remember, again, the width is going this way. So if you looked at the door in your bedroom or your front door, it would be the width of your front door. So that's about a yard. And then miles is the distance of a long road. And kilometers would be the length of 6 city blocks. So kilometers a little bit shorter than a mile. So a mile is how we measure. It says the length of a long road, but that's kind of hard because a long road could be many miles. So a mile is what we use to measure how far away something is. So if I said I'm going to drive to Sioux City, that's 30 miles away. So a mile would tell you how far you need to drive somewhere or how far something is from your house. That's what we usually use to explain how far away a distance is from where we are. If we used inches, that would be a lot of inches. So that's why we use miles. They're a bigger measurement. And if you were in another country, they would use kilometers. So they would say something is so many kilometers away from their house. And so that's kind of the same measurement as miles. All right, so we have the customary system and we have the metric system. And the main measurements within those are customary is inches, smallest, feet, that's bigger, yards, that's even bigger, and then miles, biggest. In the metric system, we have centimeters, meters, and kilometers. Okay? So those are the important measurements that you need to know for math this week. We're going to continue to use these and use our measuring tools tomorrow to measure some things and figure out the distance and the length of things tomorrow. All right, so now we're moving on to science, and in science we're going to be talking about plants. So So last week we covered social studies, and in social studies we were talking about, what were we talking about in social studies? I don't even remember. Let me think about it for a second. In social studies, we were talking about government. That's right. So now we're doing science, and we're going to be talking about plants. And I love talking about plants because we get to do some cool experiments with plants. And plants are just really fun to get to work with and have around. They kind of brighten up your room and your day, and so they're just fun. So we're going to go ahead and start learning about plants today. So I have a book to introduce plants to us. It is called From Seed to Sunflower, and then Mrs. Hooker has some pictures to show you, and I have some plants to show you too. So, From Seed to Sunflower. And this book is by Miss Stamper. A seed grows in the dirt. It is a sunflower seed. So it starts with a seed, it looks like this, and it grows in the dirt. The plant has a big yellow flower. The sunflower grows and grows. And you can see the little boy is watering the sunflower. It makes seeds for new sunflowers. And that's it. So I wanted you to see some of the pictures in there because it shows some really good pictures of parts of the plant. And Mrs. Hooker has a poster that better shows those parts of a plant as well. So when you're starting a plant, or when a plant starts out, it starts with the seed. So the seed is like this, little tiny, like pebbles is a seed. And you would be surprised, you actually eat seeds. You eat sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. Beans are actually seeds that grow, you can use to grow bean plants. So these are seeds. And then a seed, once it's been wet, so once it gets moisture and it has warmth, it'll start to sprout into one of these. And Mrs. Hooker, actually, I make sprouts, and you can eat sprouts too on salads and different things like that. At Jimmy John's, you can get sprouts on your sandwich. So it's kind of like lettuce. And then your sprout turns into a seedling. So you can see the sprout still has the seed kind of attached to it. And then the seedling, the seedling is the actual plant kind of starting to push out more. And then you're going to start getting the plant. So you're going to get the actual leaves, and it's going to look more like a plant. All right, so Mrs. Hooker has some examples of this. These are called lentils. And lentils are really yummy legumes, or kind of like a bean, that you can eat in chili or just by themselves. They're really good. They just kind of taste like a bean. I don't know how else to explain it, but they're yummy. And what you can do with these is you can sprout these and turn them into sprouts and eat them on salads, which is what Mrs. Hooker has done. And so let me show you some of my sprouts, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this too. So this is my little sprout kit that I have, and I just have a bunch of lentil seeds in there, and I wetted them down and I let them sit on top of my fridge where it was warm, and they started to sprout. So this is a lentil sprout, and you can see the root coming off of the end, and then you can see the little plant coming out of the top of it. Okay, so then what Mrs. Hooker has done is you can just eat these just like this, and they're really good, or you can put them in dirt and let them continue to grow into a plant, which Mrs. Hooker has done. So I took my lentil sprouts, I took some of them, and I planted them in dirt, and I am growing them. And so these are still, I don't know if I would quite say these are plants yet. They're still in the seedling stage, so they're still kind of growing into a plant. But I mean, they're pretty big, they're getting there. So these are my little sprouts that are now seedlings, and hopefully they'll keep growing and we'll get some lentil plants. All right, so Mrs. Hooker wanted you guys to be able to do this at home, and I want you to every day check on your seed and keep track in a journal of what it looks like. So we're going to journal with our seeds and check their progress and see how they're doing. So there are two main things that you need for a seed at first to sprout, and that is water and heat. You might say, Mrs. Hooker, I'm pretty sure you need sunshine. I've heard you need sunshine for plants. You do need sunshine for plants, but to get a seed to sprout, all you really need is heat and water. Because if you think about it, when you plant a seed, is it getting any sunlight? It's not, because it's underground. So really what it needs to open up is heat and water. So you're going to take a glass jar or a cup and some seeds, and I wouldn't do a whole bunch. I just do like a pinch of seeds in your jar just to start off. Probably do a few more than that, just cover the bottom. So start off with some seeds, and like I said, you can use lentils or just use some that you have in your kitchen. They need to be dried ones. You can't use canned beans that are already cooked, but you could use this is a mix from Hy-Vee, and it has all different kinds of beans in it. You could use some of these too. But here's the most important part. In order for your beans to start sprouting, you have to first soften the outside of the bean. So you have to do this by soaking your beans overnight in water. So Mrs. Hooker has a cup of water. So I'm gonna pour some water into my cup so all my beans are covered. So that's enough. And then I'm going to cover my jar with a coffee filter and a rubber band. Just like that. And then what you can do is you can, after you've let them soak for a whole night, so overnight, you can drain out the water from the top of the coffee filter. So you can just turn it over and drain out the water. And then you're going to put these on top of the fridge where it's warm, and just let them sit. And every day you're gonna check on them. And they do need to be wet, so you can't let them dry out. So the instructions that I use for my sprouts that I made is I wet them twice a day. So in the morning when I first wake up, and at night before I go to bed. But you don't want to have them, the only time that they're sitting in water like this is when you first soak them overnight. After that, they just need to be wet, so moist. So you could do that by using a spray bottle to spray them down in the mornings. You could do it by filling it up like this and then dumping it out every morning. But you just want your seeds to be wet. And then you're going to set them on top of the fridge where it's warm, and you're going to let them grow. And then once you have your, oops, and my poster got kind of wet. But once you have your sprouts, you can let them grow into seedlings in your jar. They will grow into seedlings. And then after you have seedlings, you can plant them in dirt like I did, and you can make little plants to have at home and just to observe and look at for the lessons to come. So again, my homework for you tonight is to get a jar, get a coffee filter and a rubber band. If you don't have coffee filters, you could use cheesecloth, or you could use paper towels. A strong paper towel would work too. And then you need your beans and your water. And I want you to work on this tonight. And then put it out. And every day we're going to observe our plants and see how they're doing, how they're growing, and what we notice about them. And then we're going to recognize what stage they're in. So are they in the seed stage, the sprout stage, the seedling stage, or the plant stage? Alrighty. we're going to go ahead and finish off with our poem today. And this poem is by Shel Silverstein. And the one that I chose today is called My Mouth Full of Food. I thought it went well with our manners book from the Bernstein Bears. Milford Dupree, though he knew he was rude, talked with his mouth full of food. He never would burp or walk out in the nude, but he talked with his mouth full of food. His mother said, "Milford, it's crude and it's lewd to talk with your mouth full of food. Why, even the milk cow, who's mooed as she's chewed, never mooed with her mouth full of food. And a cuckoo would never, ever have cuckooed if he cooed with his mouth full of food." His dad said, "Get married or get tattooed, but don't talk with your mouth full of food. If it was a crime, you would surely get sued if you talked with your mouth full of food. Why, just like an animal, you should be zooed as you talk with your mouth full of food. For you know, we're all put in a terrible mood when you talk with your mouth full of food." They pleaded and begged, they giggled and chewed, and he laughed with his mouth full of food. And all they advised him, he simply pooh-poohed. He pooh-poohed with his mouth full of food. So they sent for the gluer, and they had his mouth glued, 'cause he talked with his mouth full of food. Now, instead of "Good morning," he says, "Good morning, I talk with my mouth full of food." And that last line, I don't know if you can see. Oh, no, it's hard to see. But it's spelled just like it sounded. And he was talking like that because his mouth was glued, because he could not learn how to talk. He could not learn how to chew his food without talking. So that kind of goes along with our story from the Bernstein Bears about manners. This week, while you're at home with your family, really practice your manners, being polite, chewing with your mouth closed, not talking with your mouth full of food, saying please and thank you. And it'll just make it a whole lot more enjoyable for everybody, I promise. Also, don't forget to do your story prompt from this morning. And then you can do your project that Ms. Hooker showed you with the magazine, your story, and then your scene project. So go ahead and do those today or tomorrow whenever you have time. And don't forget to send Mrs. Hooker pictures. I would love to see what you're doing. All right, guys, have a good day. Bye.